Welcome to the Lethal Voice Podcast. I'm Robert Christopher Smith, and this is Season 1, Turning to Vengeance. Chapter 1, Putting the Cart Before the Horse. And this is Episode 3, Cart Before the Horse. Thanks for joining us. Cart before the horse. Yeah, we already established how I was doing that already with casting. But truth is, I'd been doing it long before that, with other actors, with gear, with horses, basically with everything, and all while fighting every damn bug imaginable. Let's rewind again. Before Amanda. Before the screenplay was finished, before the first rehearsal or table read, I was living in a house that I commonly refer to as the shit house. It was a rental in North Hollywood with busted pipes, a nearly dead 96-year-old woman laid out in the living room in a hospital bed, two more of the wildest characters for housemates ever, and roaches, ants, and bed bugs. I just left San Diego and just been stranded by the crooked Brazilian who bailed on our contract and left me with nowhere to go in LA. And somehow this chaos was the launch pad for what Amanda and I were now referring to as Vengeance Turns, the motion picture. I was building a cast, planning a shoot, laying tracks for a full-on indie western while sleeping in a room sprayed with so much poison that there was pretty much a permanent toxic cloud hanging in my room. And every night went to bed praying just to wake up the next day and not wake up itchy. But that's how it started. It seems like that's where it had to start. One of the first big sparks for Vengeance Turns came from a background gig on a Disney show. I still remember walking into background holding in December of 2016 and seeing nothing but wall-to-wall kids. Coming from the shit house and my own personal toxic cloud, I was already in kind of a bad mood and was now definitely not looking forward to the rest of the night. But then I saw Jamald Gardner. Grown man. Big dude. Old soul energy. I walked over and we immediately started talking, and within minutes we were bonding, discussing North Carolina, where he was born and I had just moved from back in 1996. Stories from Atlanta, Georgia. That is where Jamald moved to LA from, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid when I was growing up in Kentucky because we had family in Atlanta. Shout out to my cousins, Jennifer, Katie, Kara, Gina. Jamald and I continued to bond over things like facial hair, of all things, believe it or not. The whole reason casting contacted us both for this show was our scruffy beards. Jamald had just moved to LA when I met him, and I was telling him about this grindhouse female-led western that I was working on, and he lit up. Man, if you ever shoot that thing, call me. My dream's to play the bad guy in a western. Well,
that was wild. Like, it's just that whole when we got to talking about like a western, and you know, you asked me like, what kind of character would you love to play if you had to play one? And I was like, well, you know, I love being the villain. You know, not a lot of people cast me as the villain, but I love playing the villain because it's just that light and dark side of being a villain who comes from a standpoint of, I have to do this because I have to do this, you know, for whatever reason, and not just, hey, I'm gonna be a bad guy because I want to be a bad guy, but no, there's something that drives you to that, something that leads you to that. And then, you know, we got to talking about, he was like, well, yeah, you know, I'm want to write this western, and you know, I need a villain, you know, and I was like, I'm definitely down for that.
He got his wish. I wrote Jefferson Coletrain for Jamald Gardner, and what he delivered on set, goosebumps. The role just wouldn't work without him. Now here's where it really goes full tilt, cart before the horse. Amanda and I hadn't even finished the script. I was doing camera tests and working with my little creative family on other projects. Kelsey flew in from Chicago twice, as you've heard, once for Taker, and then she got to work with Jamald for the first time on Her Own Demons, where they both played demons. We were building something while writing it, Amanda and me. It wasn't just hustle, it was borderline lunacy. Maybe beyond lunacy. You tell me. But this thing called social media, my late 40s ass was flailing hard in that arena. I had a Facebook page, of course, like everyone else my age, basically. And I started an Instagram during the previous film, The End of Fun, mostly because my co-star, Julia Weisberg Cortez, bugged me, told me, that I had to. Shout out to Julia, by the way. Her short film, Boy Fighter, is premiering at Tribeca right now. Always rooting for you, Julia. But anyway, I launched a few pages. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all this for Vengeance Turns, and thought I was creating some kind of electronic field of dreams. And if I just built it, they would come. But they didn't come. And now I get it. Social media isn't magic. It's not. It's a grind. It's noise and hustle and heartbreak. But when you find your people, the ones who get it, the ones who engage, that is pure gold. So if you're one of the real ones, one of my people out there, whether you're here for the film, the comics, or just vibing with my lethal voice, hit me up over on Instagram at Official Vengeance Turns. Let's talk. Let's share. Let's build something weird together. Okay, speaking of carts before horses, you knew I had to get there eventually. Let's talk about actual horses. Before I ever met Amanda, before I had anything except for this wild idea, I was still in San Diego, and I was already thinking about places to film, about the horses and the animal trainers that we would need. So I started doing research and making calls. And that's when I met a woman named Judy from horsesforproductions.com. She invited me out to her Malibu ranch, showed me around, and assured me that we were going to work something out for the animals, the trainers, and be able to use her place for some of our locations. She didn't see a script. There was no script, but she didn't need it. When I told Judy this was going to be turning the whole Clint Eastwood, tough guy, spaghetti western thing inside out, with a mother doing the avenging and not a man, she was in. She felt it. She was vibing and coming off with her own ideas from the day that I met her until the time we were done shooting. And that early belief, that kind of faith, that trust, that's the fuel that indie dreams run on, man. Judy stayed in touch with me for years. And when we finally did shoot, she really felt like part of the team. Now, as a director and a writer, I'll never ask actors to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So when I wrote scenes with horseback riding, it's a Western, I ended up getting on a horse for the first time in like over 30 years while we were down in Texas visiting Amanda's ranch. And then when we got back home in LA, because they were going to be using bows and arrows, I signed up and took archery classes out in Pasadena. And it was wild. I actually hit the target a few times. I was getting better. The lessons worked. I even got close to the bullseye a few times. Total fluke, probably, but I did it. I posted some of the pictures and stuff from it's out there on my Instagram, and I dropped some of those pictures as a companion to this podcast into my newsletter, into the Lethal Voice newsletter. And you can find that at vengeanceturns.com or at procrastinagram.com. And it might give you a laugh. Maybe even a weird little push to chase your own thing. You want one final top level cart before the horse? As Amanda and I wrote Vengeance Turns, we kept getting into and developing these deep backstories for all these amazing characters that we were creating. We discussed stories about each of them, that what made them and who they were and how we find them to be who they are when we see them in the films. But we really loved what we were developing as we did this, and we're actually having a lot of fun doing it. So we turned them into comics. We started writing little short comic scripts.
I remember it was me, you, and David, and we were sitting around, we were having beers, and we were talking about the ending of the film, and that's how it kind of got to where we were. And we literally were talking about how, man, this group is awesome. The group dynamics, the characters are so awesome. Like, what's awesome is that this is the story we intentionally try to make, but we could potentially like keep going, and it gets really cool. And that's when you're like, man, this could be a really great comic book. And I remember David and we were like, yeah, like for real, though, this could be a really good comic book. And then that's kind of whenever, I remember, just brainstorming and going from this one big idea that we already had, and we were already like putting our, efforts into, and then this other huge big project spiraled out, and not one of us, at one time did we say, hey, let's finish this other one first. We'll talk about this later or in the future. No, it's just, hey, it's now part of the project. And we kept talking about it and thinking about how awesome it was, because we just fell in love with the characters. And honestly, one of my favorite, platforms to read about a character is comic books.
We started scripting short comic book stories, and I was even hiring artists before we even knew who all of the characters were in the film or exactly how the overall story was going to end. The first one that got finished was called Growing Pained. It's about Simon Coletrain, Jefferson's son, and what it was like growing up under that heavy shadow. It's raw. It's real. It's prophetic and beautiful. You can read it right now on procrastinagram.com and the newsletter. Just look for Vengeance Turns comic section on Procrastinagram or for the latest newsletter. Next time on the Lethal Voice Podcast, Episode 4, Write What You Know. Amanda and I finally finish the script, just in time for everything to fall apart. You're not going to want to miss that one. Until then, dear friends, stay bold, stay weird, and never be afraid to put your own cart before the horse. Because honestly, sometimes that's where the magic starts. Sometimes that's maybe even why the magic starts. Oh, and do not forget, Vengeance Turns Volume 1 and Volume 2 are streaming for free right now on Tubi. Go see what all the bedbug-fueled madness actually manifested. And hey, one more thing. If you want a freebie, you've got a free digital sequel comic called Vengeance Turns Explosions of Truth that picks up right where the films leave off. You can grab it right now, free, at lethalvoice.com. Totally free, no catch. See you next time on the Lethal Voice Podcast.